Hi, and welcome to this review of Ilona Andrews' novel of the Edge, Bayou Moon. So, looking at this cover, we can make some assumptions. One is that the artist really liked the color green, and I guess it's pretty clear that this is a fantasy novel with a romance element, and you would be right. So, let's start with Ilona Andrews, because Ilona Andrews is an interesting double author. It's actually the pen name for Ilona Gordon and her husband Andrew Gordon. They're an American husband and wife team who write books under a pen name that is a combination of their two first names. And there's a whole heap of history for them. Their early career, I think their first novel was Magic Bites, 2007. And they've written mostly in this other Magic Bites, Magic other stuff, Kate Daniels, I think it is, world. And they've written a lot of books and stories in that. They've got another one or two, I think, at least, spin-offs of the Kate Daniels. Back in the early 2010s, which this was published 2010, I believe, I was reading a lot of more supernaturally fantasy type books, and many of them do have a strong, yes, 2010, a romance component. I've moved away from them in recent years because it seems to me that the fantasy element has decreased and the romance has increased until we reach the romantasy hashtag, which basically means that the whole book is a romance around which is a thinly layered world of magic, cyberpunk, steampunk, or any other whatever that they choose to throw in. But the world building is minimalistic in many of them. Unlike Ilona Andrews, where the world building is really excellent. So between 2009, when the first one came out, this being the second, and 2012, I'm going to say, I think, they wrote a series of five or six novels in the Edge series, and I really like them. They're my favorites by this husband-wife author team. And you could think of it as a combination of urban fantasy, supernatural type writing, and I really like the premise. The premise is that our world, the world that we know, or at least the one that I know outside the door, is called the Broken. But there's also a second world paralleling it, or almost like a mirror image or copy on the other side, which is called the Weird. The Weird appears to be geographically very similar to us in the Broken. But what it does have is it has a lot of magic and a whole different history. You may have some elements that are similar. So you've got French speakers with an obvious French background, though they call themselves Gaulish. You've got a whole heap of different history. So the actual history of the American continent, as described very briefly here, is very different and almost the entire opposite to what's happened in our world. Rather than Europeans moving in on North American First Nations people created their own empire and ended up moving in the other direction. So very interesting. Lightly touched on, because most of this novel, like the other ones in the Edge, occur on the Edge. Ta-da! So in between the Broken, which is us, and the Weird, which has the magic, you've got this long, thin, swervy bit. Sometimes it's really thick, sometimes it's tiny thin. And that is the Edge. People from the Weird can go onto the Edge, though there's border issues. And some people, very specific people from the Broken, can find their way over to the Edge. But people from the Weird can't all come all the way to the Broken, typically, because their magic halts them at the border. Painful, maybe fatal for someone with too much magic trying to cross into the Broken. So that's the background of the whole Edge series. And I actually thought that I'd read most of the Edge series, but when I came across this one, it didn't seem familiar. And I've just finished it. It's not a small book. There was no familiarity to it. So I'd say that back when I was reading them in the early 2010s, I missed it. Again, not a small book if you include the epilogue, which you really ought to. It's 462 pages. Quite a lot of fun. Not as fast a read as some sort of supernaturally romancy ones can be, because there's a lot of content here. So in Bayou Moon, we start around about the Edge area. We've got one family. So obviously, since there's a romance element, there's going to be two people finding each other. Like Butcher says in The Boys, what is it about a romance? Two people finding each other. So the two people in question here are Cerise Cerise Ma. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Quite possibly I'm not. She comes from a large clan, and they refer to themselves as the Rats because they're so numerous. They live in the Maya, which is part of the Edge that's swampy, hence Bayou Moon. I've never really been to America. I certainly haven't been to that swampy part that's inspired so many great novelists. It's like these swampy ones. You've got Poppy Z. Bright. You've got a whole heap of people that are inspired by that whole New Orleans, swampy area. True Blood. Anyhow, she and her family live in the middle of the Maya, and they are deeply immersed in an 80-year-old feud with another family, which is not as numerous, but wealthier. And one day, Cerise and a couple of her cousins get on their horses and they ride to their grandparents' house, which is outside their warded territory. When they get there, they find that this alternative clan have taken over, and they have in court claimed rights to the land. So this sends Cerise on this long journey. She has to travel across to the Broken where her uncle is, who has all the deeds. And though she's kind of the default head of her family. Oh yes, so as the reason they went to their grandparents' place is because her mother and father had gone there earlier and never come back. So it's not only that their property has been taken over by these guys they're feuding with, but her mother and father have vanished. And in order to get into the house, delay the legal occupation of the property, and prove that it's theirs, she has to go into the Broken, find her uncle, get some papers. And that's an interesting enough storyline in itself. It's really good and it's really dense. There's lots of characters, there's lots of stuff happening, there's lots of imminent risk, as it were, to keep you interested. Now, our other character is William. William is living in the Broken, even though he was born in the Weird. Now, there's two main countries in the Weird that come into them. One of them is called the Kingdom of Louisiana, I think, and the other one I can't pronounce, but it begins with A. Something beginning with A. Whatever. Now, he was born in the something beginning with A kingdom, territory, country, whatever it is. But he was born as a changeling. So he transforms into a wolf. He's what we'd call a werewolf. They don't call it that. It doesn't seem to be linked to the moon particularly. But he was born with that blood, and as a true changeling, he was born as a puppy. So in some parts of the Weird, changelings automatically killed. They're feared, they're considered monsters, etc., etc. Where he was born, that wasn't the case, and women can surrender their changeling child. They don't have dominant changeling blood themselves. It seems like it's a very recessive trait. It can re-emerge, and there is a little bit of a discussion about the genetics of emergence that I didn't pay too much attention to, and which I don't remember terribly well, I have to admit. Anyway, William the Wolf is living in the Broken in a trailer, and he quite likes it. It's lonely, He's isolated, he doesn't have much in life, but up until then, life has been pretty brutal to him. He grew up in this orphanage where basically they brutalize all the changelings in an attempt to turn them into super soldiers. Once he graduated from this orphanage, he then joined the army, and he was in the army until he was court-martialed for something that he later explains to Cerise. So we've got these two characters. William is approached by the Mirror, who are kind of super agents, super FBI, CIA type agency, I guess, for one of the countries in the Weird. Their opponents on the other country are called the Hand, so you've got the Mirror and the Hand behind the scenes. They've come to him, they want him to go on this special mission to retrieve some stuff. He isn't interested in the stuff, but during that he will get the chance possibly to confront and hopefully murder, kill, death, his ancient nemesis Spider. Now, the Hand side from the other country are monsters. They basically take humans and they do this strange fusion thing where they fuse them with other parts of other animals. They insert tentacles and poison glands and all sorts of things. So you've got this army of monsters under Spider, who William has clashed with several times before. And that sets the stage for our story, where William and Cerise end up travelling together, not knowing each other. A people smuggler is getting them from the Broken back to the Edge, I believe. And then everything falls apart and the two of them fall on each other's resources. They travel together for some time. And eventually they start to become interested in each other. Cerise invites him back to the family home. He gets enmeshed in the battles and they end up as a couple. The way in which they do that is really good. This has got plenty of time to build plots. There's some magnificent battles. Really good fighting in this one, which always inclines me toward a romance. You've got two protagonists. Both of them are strong. Both of them are fighters. Both of them bring their own history into the story, and that's what makes it interesting. There is eventually a confrontation with Spider. Where Spider falls into all this is he's backing the other clan that the Moors are fighting with, and he's looking for the same items that the Mirror is looking for. So you've got some solid world building, really good plot. This is the sort of romance that works in fantasy, supernatural fantasy, whatever you would call it, because it isn't all about the romance. The romance part is sort of entwined and enmeshed into the plot. You've got two characters that are interesting in their own right, and yes, you watch these two characters coming together, but the whole thing isn't just about that. So, yeah, not for everyone, but I think if you like a bit of romance in with your fantasy and you like a really interesting world building exercise, I think I would definitely recommend the Edge series by Ilona Andrews. I would say not for everyone. It's not their most famous or popular either. This other series and all the spin-off series, the Kate Daniels, are their more famous. I did try reading them at one stage. I don't think I like the protagonist as much as I like the Edge series. The Edge series also isn't continuous. Each one of them is a standalone. This is a number 2, and some of the characters from the number 1, which I definitely read, I remember them, come into it. So our main male protagonist in this one, William, was actually a side character in the first of the Edge series, and now he gets his own storyline and his own romance, and he gets the girl. So yeah, boy, happy ending, boy gets girl, or rather changeling werewolf wolfy thing gets girl, but whatever. The changeling wolf and the girl are good with it, so we need to be as well. One thing I did like about the early 200s and the 210 style writing of romances, supernatural romances, urban romances, all those romancy things, they tended to have series which was the same world building and the same theme, and yet you didn't have to read them in exactly the same order because they each had their own individual characters. Okay, so bit of a different book, bit of a different review. You're gonna have to forgive me. My birds are flying around frantically like they want me to come and give them some attention or something. Thank you for watching. Read good books. Have a great year.